All right, hello, I'm Glen McCallum. We're here with the OpenMRS Community Spotlight. I'm a foreign correspondent. We're here today with Joaquín Blaya, who is the founder of a new company that sprung up around OpenMRS called eHealth Systems. Joaquín and I first got in touch last year, around June 2009. I was doing some concept management work to help his research. He was working on a Spanish translation of the OpenMRS Concept Dictionary at the time, actually the MVP Concept Dictionary. In the last month or so, I heard about his new venture at eHealth Systems, and I was really impressed and perhaps a little bit jealous of what he's doing down there. I had a ton of questions, as I'm sure everyone does, and I thought I got Joaquín to sit down here and let me ask some of them so that we can all learn. A little bit about your background. I know you're a PhD at Harvard and MIT in engineering.
Medical engineering, right?
Medical engineering, yeah. I know you're part of the Brigham and Women's Decision Support Group as well. Long list of distinguished awards and scholarships. Co-founder of GHD, Global Health Delivery Online.
Well, I'm actually a moderator at GHD Online, right?
Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen someone set up so well for a tenure track in an academic career. And so when I heard that you founded a startup, I'm just like, oh, what happened? So how did you go from academic career to founding a startup?
Yeah. Well, I mean, basically, what happened was seeing the need of basically what needed to happen next in the objective of disseminating and using health information systems in resource poor settings. So you're right that I was definitely on the line to have a tenure track position. But then within the OpenMRS community, what we started seeing was that there was a need for having organizations that provided services and that promoted OpenMRS locally. So not just from the US or not from Europe, but and so what I found was that my background also fit perfectly to start a local organization in order to provide those services. I mean, I'm originally from Chile. I was born there. I worked in Peru, and so I know I can go between both the U.S. and Latin America very easily. So that's how my career path kind of tended more towards the service provider and the starting a company as opposed to being a professor.
Have you ever launched a company before?
No. I mean, I've worked in small startups. I once worked in a startup that did cardiovascular medical devices. But no, this is a brand new experience for me, which is, as most entrepreneurs will tell you, has been an amazing learning experience, but also extremely difficult and long.
What's the most difficult thing you've encountered so far?
I think it's probably the mental transition from academia into business. I mean, some specific examples is marketing, becomes a much bigger part of what you do. So it not only matters that you do, that you provide a good service, but it also matters that people know that you provide a good service. Whereas in academia, publishing and things tend to be more about writing research articles or applying to research grants, whereas here it's much more face-to-face contact. You have to be able to provide an image that reflects what your company intends to do.
So who is eHealth Systems Chile? Is this Joaquín? Is there other people involved?
Yeah. So there's actually two of us co-founded the company. It's myself and a Chilean clinician. Her name is Verónica Rojas. And currently we're in the process of incorporating a third member or a third director who will be more the the business side of, so to have kind of a three-legged stool, the clinical informatics, the clinician side, and the business side.
Are there any other staff involved at this point?
Yeah, so right now we've hired two programmers, and we're working on a couple of different projects one with the Catholic University here in Chile to do diabetic and basically self-care for diabetic patients. And the other one is a project with IDRC to do a needs assessment and a situational analysis of Latin America. Well, specifically 10 representative countries in Latin America. So, yeah, so it's been a pretty good start.
Any other advisors involved that are kind of helping you along the way?
We're still in the process of creating a board of advisors, but I'm still very attached to OpenMRS, and so actually, for example, I went to the OpenMRS conference in Africa just a couple months ago. So even though it's not formal, I mean, I believe that most of the OpenMRS board has been advising me on how to do this. Everything from Hamish, who I worked with for my PhD, to Paul Beyondich and Berg and Chris Seabrecht. But the idea is that once having established this a little bit, we'll expand the board of advisors to include also Latin American contacts.
So what is your business model? Is it services only, like consulting, or you have some products on the roadmap as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so we're definitely not a consulting firm or just a consulting firm. Our idea is to provide basically the full range of implementation consulting to products. And then what's really most important for us is the services and the analytics that we'll be able to provide after we've implemented the systems. So in other words, my vision of what my company will be able to provide is, first, we'll be able to have a full, a very well organized implementation. And that's really important because, I mean, one thing that I see here in Chile and also in other places is that there's this mentality that health informatics is software, where really it's about how an organization organically changes in order to better optimize its processes. And then on top of that, you put software, which is also needed, but the organization needs to change in order to be able to adapt to having information systems or electronic information systems. And then we'll provide products such as this first one that we're developing, which is a way for patients to be educated and to become more proactive about their care, specifically in diabetes, and then expanding it to other chronic diseases. But really where I see that we can make the most impact is providing services and ways to optimize processes and how a health center works using information from these clinical systems. So in other words, what I want, what I see in 5, 10 years down the line is that we can go to a public health center or to a local a municipality, which is in charge of, say, 3 to 6 health centers. And we're able to say, look, in terms of the number of patients that your doctors see, you guys are number 10 out of 35 municipalities that use our system. And here, we've collated the 3 or 5 major reasons that the first 5 municipalities, what they have in common to how they are more efficient. And these are the ways they do it. And that way we can help, say, the less efficient municipalities to work better. So that's really the vision that I see is a way to, having these systems implemented, this is a way for organizations to be able to treat patients better and faster.
So it sounds like there's a significant operating model or business process model component to what you envision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and this is the vision that we have. I mean, right now we're in the process of creating those products. But the beauty about being able using OpenMRS and the other open source platforms that we use is that eventually we'll be able to, using this de-identified data, we'll be able to get to these business processes.
Do you feel that this business analysis component, this business process component, is something that's missed across the board in the OpenMRS community?
I have to admit, I don't know. In talking with more the core developers of OpenMRS, there's still a lot we want to do with OpenMRS. And within the OpenMRS community, there's still a lot of focus on creating different systems and modules, and which is exactly what I think they should be focusing on. That's why, they're developing OpenMRS to be a more robust system. What I've been talking with Hamish and Chris Sebrex and Paul Beyondich about is creating organizations that are on the periphery of the OpenMRS community that provide these services. So basically, organizations that do exactly what I do, and that they can focus on how to provide services around OpenMRS, and hence more along the lines of business processes. I think the core developer or the foundation of OpenMRS should be to develop a very good, robust EMR platform. It shouldn't be, all these the things that are around OpenMRS. We should create organizations around it that are able to focus on those things.
So what came first, the idea or the opportunity?
Oh, the opportunity, definitely. I'm definitely not that smart. No, the true story is that while working in Peru, I would come down to Chile to visit my family, and I met a lot of really interesting people in this field here in Chile, and I started giving lectures about OpenMRS and about open source health information systems, and what I found was that people said, well, that's great, these systems sound great, but I want a contract. I want technical support. If this thing doesn't work at 2 in the morning, I want to call someone and have them resolve the problem. And so it actually took several trips, and hearing that from many different organizations, both in Chile and in other countries, to actually realize that, hey, what's actually missing here isn't the technical system. It's not the interest of people, in health organizations. It's the organization that's going to go out and sell it and provide the technical support and use those systems in an appropriate way. Because there's dozens of organizations that are using OpenMRS, but they tend to be more autodidactic. They tend to have, looked up OpenMRS, implemented themselves. They have the engineers and the informaticians in-house. And what I found, a lot of organizations in Latin America wanted to outsource this. They wanted to contract someone to do it. And so that's when it hit me. Well, that's what I need to do.
Do you think this need is a kind of a product of IT maturity and where organizations are at? They've been there and realized the expense of taking care of all those things themselves?
I think for some organizations, but I think for other organizations that here I'm going to be more specific. In the Chilean setting, there's already about 4 or 5 organizations that are providing these kinds of services, and really they're IT companies. They're not health IT companies. And what I mean by that is that it's a business person with a bunch of programmers. And so they really don't understand yet fully what it means to take IT into the clinical setting. And so what's happened here in Chile is that there's very few organizations that have the technical expertise in-house. So more than the costs, it's more of we don't have the technical expertise to maintain these systems, and hence I want to hire a company, and that's why these other companies have sprouted.
Very neat. Um, are you bootstrapping? Are you seeking external funding? Have you saved money that you're investing to get this thing going? Which model are you?
Yeah, very, very good question. So the initially we started bootstrapping. So just by both by funding that self-funding from the founders. Now, fortunately, we have enough contracts to maintain ourselves and to be able to create our first system. And so the idea is actually to, with this first system, to be able to maintain ourselves and be able to seek government funding from the Chilean government and also U.S. funding in order to go into the next, to expand the system to other municipalities. And then having done that, depending on what we see the needs are, perhaps go to venture capital, not venture capital, but probably more like personal investors.
Angel investors.
Angel investors or investors that we know personally as opposed to venture capital. Because even though we're a company, we have very much of a social objective as our primary objective. In other words, we want to promote open source, but also promote it within the public health sector. And so in that sense, we're trying to have a double bottom line of having both a social impact, but then also creating a medium to large size company that that has profits and is able to reinvest back into the communities where we work and improving the technology that we use.
So it sounds like you're still in a bootstrap model with the possibility of further government contracts and possibly grants to help you along the way. And if necessary to scale further down the road, you would consider other personal funding opportunities.
Right. Well, exactly, and I think both, as I mentioned, both personal and investors, because one thing that has actually happened is that I've realized that even that a social business is still a business, and so, and this leads back to what I mentioned before about this mentality change between academia and changing my mentality from academic into business is that initially, probably about a year ago, if you would have asked me, oh, will you take on investors? I would have said, no, like we'll be able to bootstrap this and create it, we're a social business. And what I realized over the last year is that with this social objective, we're still a business and need to, both have very clear objectives about the services and what we're going to provide, but also that we're not exempt from, say, investors or other ways that businesses grow. And specifically in talking with Paul Beyondich from OpenMRS, we both agree that the more businesses that take on and start using open source systems, OpenMRS specifically, but ODK or Comcare or the other mobile systems that have also sprung up, the better it's going to be. Even if these companies don't necessarily have a social objective, just the fact that there are organizations that are providing these services and that have become dependent on these platforms will make OpenMRS and the others stronger.
So there's lots of different aspects and different pieces of this. There's the social agenda, like you mentioned. There's the systems. There's open source. If you had to pick one area, where would your passion be in all the different pieces of this puzzle you're putting together?
Oh, definitely the social objective part of it. That's actually the reason why I'm here. A little bit of my background is that I actually used to work on medical devices, on robotics, in rehabilitation specifically. So for my master's, what I did was create a robotic ankle brace with this professor, Hugh Herr, at MIT. And there, what I realized was that, I had built this great contraption and it worked, but only about 2 to 3% of the people who actually needed it were going to be able to use it because it was very expensive. You had to have very good insurance. And so that's when this change happened where I said, where I realized that as opposed to focusing on a technology, I wanted to focus on a population of people that I wanted to help. So I realized that what I needed to do was focus, not ask, okay, what am I good at? I needed to ask, who do I want to help? And that was people in resource support settings. And so that's when I connected with Partners in Health and with Hamish and started, and learned more about informatics and began working on this. So yeah, so definitely the social impact is what drives me at the end in order to do what I do.
Very neat. Thank you. Um, so how did you get your first customer?
The first customer was actually it's kind of hard to decide whether it was American Development Bank or IDRC from Canada. But both of them were basically through contacts with the open source community. Um, so specifically, IDRC, the International Development Research Agency in Canada, they they had worked with OpenMRS a lot, mostly in Africa, and there I found out that they also worked in Latin America, and in conversations with them, they told us that, or told me that they wanted to do this needs assessment, or better said, a situational analysis. And so that's when those conversations started, which led to our contract with them. Um, and with the Inter-American Development Bank, it was actually through John Jackson of Damagi, because the IDB contacted both of us in order to help them in this project called Mobile Citizen that they were working on. And so that's how they connected me with the Catholic University here in Chile in order to do that project.
So you're a partner with Damagi in that contract?
No, actually, we've been Demagian. I've known John Jackson and Neil Lesh for probably 4 or 5 years now, and we've actually been looking to see how we can work together. We haven't gotten a combined contract yet, but we've been looking for it for quite some time and just haven't found the right funding stream for it. But no, the project that we're doing here in Chile is between eHealth Systems here in Chile and the Catholic University. So with some help and advice from John and Neil and others at the MAG.
Is there anybody else in the world kind of tackling this area around open source that you're tackling?
And you mean providing services and
Services, the processes, the modeling.
Mhm. There are, there are other open source systems for, there's MedSphere, a
Right.
pretty large company in the US around Vista.
But I'm thinking more services around OpenMRS specifically.
Mhm. Right. So specifically around OpenMRS, there's, I think it's budding right now. So there's, in Latin America, for example, there's two organizations that come to mind which are beginning to provide services. The first one is the Sustainable Sciences Institute in Nicaragua, and the second one is Partners in Health Peru, so Socios en Salud in Lima, in Peru. And so they're both NGOs working on their own projects, but they're also beginning to extend that out into providing services to other organizations. And in Africa, there's actually a lot of different projects going on, mostly centered around the OASIS project with Chris Siebrechts at Medical Research Council. So they founded a nonprofit called GEMBI, and they also have, I might be wrong, but 4 or 5, I believe, different nodes, what they call nodes in different countries. So it's a group of people that are providing services around OpenMRS. And there's also, just in the last OpenMRS conference, I met Ime and Lanre, who are two Kenyans that are creating a company around OpenMRS. And I know for a fact that I'm missing about 2 or 3 different organizations in Africa, whose names are escaping me right now, but that have also kind of taken first step.
Hmm. Are you, would you consider opportunities outside of Latin America, or are you focused specifically on that continent?
I mean, I'm not closed, or better said, we as an organization aren't closed to opportunities outside of Latin America. Um, but we're not looking for them specifically. So we're definitely focused in our funding and product research. We're definitely focused in Latin America. But if IDRC or if some other, if a hospital or some other organization were to come and show us a project that we thought would be interesting, then yeah, I mean, we would definitely think about going outside of Latin America.
Uh, how many hours are you putting in?
Well, we are here on a Saturday, so I think that kind of shows you a little bit. um, so I probably average about 60, 60 to 70 hours a week, which is actually not as much as, for example, when I was doing the PhD. And this is slightly more on the personal note, but uh, changing countries. So I lived in the U.S. for 23 years, and changing countries is actually quite an interesting and it takes a lot of time in order to get used to living in another country, even if it's your country of birth, where. Um, and so I'm still in the process. And then this is actually kind of advice for anyone that's thinking about moving back or moving to another country. It usually takes more time and effort than you think.
So there's a cultural shift you're describing here. Is that cultural shift to place more emphasis on family, more emphasis on relaxation, or to work even harder? Is that any of those things come into
Yeah,
play?
yeah. So there's definitely that cultural shift. I mean, there's also just the personal change. Just even just moving from one place to another on a personal level takes a lot of effort to getting used to a new environment and I mean, I mean, I miss Boston and my friends and and everything that I had there. But so that's kind of the first aspect. There's definitely the second aspect, as you mentioned, of cultural. And yeah, here in Chile, there's definitely, as in most of Latin America, there's more of an emphasis on family, on spending, weekends are family and friend. There's not, there's a lot, there are people that work during weekends, but mostly it's time to be spent with family. Um, and so for me, there's some part of that, but there's also, I mean, my roots in working 70, 80 hours a week are still strong enough where I managed to get it. I mean, and there's also just a lot that needs to get done. With a startup, you end up doing everything from the marketing to the business development to the technical development. So yeah, so you just need to put in the hours.
So in those things, the marketing, the technical development, the business development, what's been the biggest challenge so far?
Definitely the business development, by far.
Can you give us a
Just
specific example of what part of the business development?
yeah, sure. I think the first thing is just having people recognize who you are, or having people know your name. If you're a startup, and especially like me, if you're coming from another country, you don't have a built-in network of people who you know, or organizations that know what you do. So the first is just having people know that you exist. But the second thing is being able to figure out what the need is that you're going to meet. I mean, business people here call it the pain. What's the pain that an organization has that you're going to address and that they're willing to hire you, not waste, but spend money in order to solve. And and that's particularly it's harder than you might think, because you really need to nail, what this organization actually needs and the solution that addresses specifically that need. So to be more concrete, when I came to Chile, I talked about OpenMRS, as this great open source solution, as a platform, very flexible, very modular, using standards, all the benefits that OpenMRS has. And that got me nowhere. People don't want to hear about a platform. People want to hear about a product that is going to solve their problem. And so that's also been a shift that we've had to do, that has been challenging.
Okay. How are you attracting new business? Do you have a strategy or a plan that you're using to attract new customers, new business, get your brand out there?
hmm Yeah, so the first thing we're doing is creating a product. So that's what this first contract with the IADB and the Catholic University is going to allow us to do, is to have a product that we can market, and be able to sell and implement in other organizations. And then the second step, which we're starting now, is promoting that product. So not the actual system, because it'll be ready for deployment at the end of the year, but just beginning to announce to other people and other municipalities and organizations what the vision of the system is, what it'll be able to do. And so once the product is able to be deployed, organizations will know about it, and it'll be easier to go out and implement it in those settings.
Central message that you'd like to communicate to the OpenMRS community about eHealth systems?
Well, it's probably not a surprise. I mean, I've tried to be, and we have been in constant communication with at least a lot of the core part of the OpenMRS community. But I think probably the biggest message is for people that are interested in starting these service provider organizations, that they should definitely do it, first of all. And second of all, that we've already started talking within the OpenMRS community about creating a cooperative of these different organizations in order to strengthen each other and to be able to to make it easier for organizations to start. And second of all, to be able to provide not only services within one specific country, but to have a network of these organizations that can spread OpenMRS and different products throughout the world. So for example, one thing we've been talking about has been to create this cooperative where you have, say, 30 some odd organizations that are part of a cooperative, and so are part owners of this head organization. And the head of the cooperative is able to go into talks with USAID or PEPFAR or WHO and sit alongside of other major organizations. Even to the likes of IBM or Sun or Oracle, and be able to say, look, we have these technologies, we have the manpower and the technical capacity to implement it in this set of countries. And so we'll be able to have these contracts and use OpenMRS in implementing it in 12, HIV programs in 12 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, or in Latin America, and the Caribbean, in order to promote, specific health or Millennium Goals. But basically be able to have conglomerate and have the power that a network of organizations has.
I think that's actually a really key objective, in that in having a local company, it would actually provide a lever of success for a larger partner like IBM, because they could also provide a gateway to the language and the culture of that country, and that would make it, increase chances of success tremendously.
Right. Yeah, and actually what I mentioned about having this open source cooperative doesn't exclude at all the other thing which you mentioned, which is also partnering with other corporations. So, for example, I've actually spoken with the Latin American representative of IBM for health solutions. And so we're also looking to partner with them to see how the products that we develop, we can go into some kind of agreement in order to expand them. So I definitely see that if thinking about the local organization, that they would be able to be part of this cooperative, an open source cooperative, but at the same time be able to have agreements with other organizations, say IBM or Sun or whoever they would like, and they're not exclusive at all.
Thank you very much. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Email, definitely. And that email is, probably the best email is the one at eHealth Systems. So it's,
say it out.
Okay, so I'll have to say, so it's J Blaya, so we should probably let her out. So it's JBLAYA at eHealth Systems, altogether, .cl for Chile at the end.
Thank you very much. I've certainly learned a ton and loved hearing about what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'll definitely keep updating everyone on it. I mean, as we mentioned, I mean, this idea of having, of not only being a local organization, but promoting this throughout OpenMRS is part a key objective. And actually, before I forget, one of the ways that we're promoting these other creation of these service providers around OpenMRS is we're having a meeting, a conference in Nicaragua at the end of November of this year. And so it's basically, it's a way for people to learn about mobile systems and how mobile systems are integrating with OpenMRS. And so probably the best way to find out information about that is either to email me or there's a website for the system, for the conference, which is, it's in Spanish, so it's www.informatica-lac.org. So it's medical informatics-LAC, but in Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If you don't know Spanish, email Joaquin. And
exactly. Perfect.
Thanks again for taking this time to meet with me on a Saturday.
Oh, no, thanks so much, Glenn, for having the interview.